Here we're going to talk through some preparations for the collar on the jacket, specific to the construction methods that follow in the next videos. So here I have my top collar and top collar stand pattern pieces. Now, for those who are studying with me in the university, these are the pattern pieces you will have. You can also see we've got different seam allowances for construction. Some of these seams are 0.5 and others are a centimetre, all of which are explained during the videos that follow. But really it just means having that smaller seam allowance. There's no need to trim the bulk of the seam out afterwards, so this it helps increase the speed in a production scenario and less fabric and so on. So it just makes things a little bit easier and it takes out a process. I've also on my patterns made sure I'm clear that this is my stand attach seam, clearly labelled, and this is my collar attach. And you can see the two concave shapes go together, which if you didn't have these marked, I think we would sort of be inclined to think they go that way. So it's important that we have things labelled clearly for us to understand. So the first thing I need to change for the construction method in the videos is the top collar. Now, there are many ways to put a collar on. You can experiment, you can have a look through other jackets, but for the method we are doing, I need to extend the edge of my collar on both sides, obviously making our pattern symmetrical. So what I've done, first of all, I've traced around my original pattern and I have clearly labelled what it is, put all the existing notches on to make sure we know where we go from here, and again writing stand attach, the seam allowances, etc. So I want to extend the end of my collar to wrap around to the under collar for the construction. So using my pattern square, or you can use your master, I'm going to the 3.5 centimetre line and I am placing that line on the edge of my pattern line, and I'm just marking that in. I think you could consider this extension would vary depending on the thickness and the bulk of your fabrics, whether it's an overcoat, whether it's a jacket. So this would just be an average, a guide for you to base your extension on in the future. So then I'm going to extend the outside lines of the collar. So I'm going to sort of draw this around and naturally feel where it wants to extend. Then where the collar originally comes to, I'm going to add notches here, because when I'm attaching the under collar, it only goes to the length of the original collar. Say this is an extension which folds underneath. So once we have our pattern piece amended, we can cut that out on the paper and then we can block through some fabric to cut the actual pieces out. Now, block fusing is having your piece of fabric on the right grain, large enough that your pattern pieces fit on and it is pre-fused. So block fusing is, as it suggests, it's a block, as in a building block, rectangular shape, but it can be any shape. It's about being big enough to accommodate the pieces you want cut out. You can see here all my notches are clearly marked, and we've got the extra notches there and the extension which we have added to the pattern. If we put the original one on there, you can see our extension and our notches in the right place. I've chalked our notches. I am not going to cut into these notches due to having 5mm seams, so it's important you put this on with chalk, as we don't want to weaken or compromise those narrow seam allowances. You can use a traditional tailor's chalk, any other means to mark, but I have sort of one of these that have the powdered chalk in, which sort of marks really easily on your fabric. So blocked fuse, piece of your main fabric, your panels marked on and cut out, and you can see, if I show you here on our collar, it is virtually completed. You can see here the extension of our top collar has our seam allowances pressed underneath, and the under collar is attached. This extension then folds back on itself, creating a lovely neat edge on the front, as we have on this side, and then it is hand stitched into position. All this is talked through in much more detail in the videos that follow. It's just illustrating here why we have the extension and why we've put it on the pattern piece. Of course, you could have just bagged out this end as an alternative, which is what the original pattern pieces suggested, and that was how I toiled it. I then did other sample toiles of sections of the collar of different methods, and selected this one as my final option to move forward with in this construction. Okay, so just there a few things to consider there before you continue on with the videos and your garment, that we are going to change our pattern piece for our top collar, that we will block fuse to cut them out to create greater stability so there's no distortion on any of our curves. Clearly mark all your notches with a chalk, as we're not going to snip in because of narrow seam allowances, and then the construction as follows, with our extension here folding over from the right side of the jacket to the underneath of the collar onto the melton to be hand stitched in place.